We keep things rolling here on the Sports Cubicle. I'm your host, Mike Mercado, with the one and only Daniel Marver, and we hope you all are enjoying the madness that is March and these games in the men and women's brackets coming up. But Marver, before we get to the madness that happened on the court, how about we talk about some madness that happened on the diamond in Tokyo as the Chicago Cubs lose both games to the LA Dodgers in the Tokyo series on Tuesday, March 18th. They fall 4-1, and then the next day fall 6-3. Some quick numbers for you. Shohei Ohtani in the first game of the series goes 2 for 5 with 2 runs, and Yamamoto 5 innings pitched with 3 hits, 1 earned run, 1 walk, and 4 strikeouts for your Chicago Cubs. Not a lot. Ian Happ is the only one that really showed up, but Shota Imanaga, 4 innings pitch, 4 walks, and 2 strikeouts. So a pretty easy going start for 2 of the big stars, the Japanese stars, on the pitching mound for the Dodgers and Cubs. But then on, what was that, Thursday? No, Wednesday, the Dodgers decided that it was time. Shohei Ohtani with a monster home run. They beat the Cubs 6-3, and Justin Steele goes 4 innings, 5 hits, 5 earned runs, 1 walk on 5 strikeouts. I also want to bring this to the classroom, marvelous one. This is from Awful Announcing. Tokyo Series shatters MLB viewership record in Japan. This is by Drew Lerner. This was published on March 19th. Unsurprisingly, game 1 of the Tokyo Series was much must-watch television in the host country. Tuesday's MLB opener between the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Chicago Cubs in Tokyo, which featured several high-profile Japanese baseball stars, including Shohei Ohtani, drew an audience of 25 million viewers in Japan, according to MLB PR. For reference, the total population of Japan is around 125 million, meaning 1 in 5 Japanese citizens watch the Dodgers and Cubs as the Dodgers won on Tuesday. The audience also shattered MLB's previous Japanese viewership record, game 1 of last year's Seoul Series in neighboring South Korea, which captured 18.7 million viewers. So, Marver, before we get on to actual play and how it looked on the diamond, this was the smartest move for Major League Baseball when it comes to expansion, to going to a country that loves baseball, that has a appreciation and its own tradition of baseball, bringing out the LA Dodgers and the Chicago Cubs. So for me, I had fun. I was already up heading to the radio station here at WCPT at 5 a.m. So I enjoyed hearing Ron and Pat to start my morning. But what did you think about the Tokyo series? And was it a success? Was it the right move to send these 2 franchises across to our friends over in Tokyo?
Couldn't have been more successful since these 2 teams have the majority of the Japanese-born players, it seems to me, just based upon math. And I still want to know if Otani's homer left the building or not.
He is literally a unicorn. Before we talk,
Yeah.
I mean, we could talk about that for a second too, because it was obviously a success. And I think Suzuki and Imanaga had really good showings for the Chicago Cubs. You had Yamamoto and the kid. I'm blanking on his name right now. I'll check it out in 1 second. And obviously, Shohei had wonderful showings themselves and represented Sasaki. Roki is the kid's name that the Dodgers got that the Cubs weren't in on. But it was a showcase. It's kind of what I love about these series, Marver. And, obviously these games matter. If the Cubs lose the division by 1 game, half a game, whatever you want, you can look back at getting swept by the best team in baseball. But I think big picture wise, I love these type of moments because it's kind of like the World Baseball Classic, where you get to introduce the game in America to some of these different energy, these vibes, these customs, and you're able to kind of mix them together in a entertaining way, right? Because everybody plays baseball the same way, essentially. Can't really change the game as much as Major League Baseball does, but to have the energy, the heat, if you will, in that building, as these 2 big time franchises that one is a definitely a World Series contender, is a World Series favorite in the LA Dodgers. Another team that has world-class recognition and can be a player in the MLB playoffs coming up. I think one thing we learned beyond what the popularity is The Dodgers are on a different stratosphere. They didn't have Mookie Betts or Freddie Freeman. They are on a different planet than almost any other team in baseball. And it's not just how great that offense is. That bullpen can shut you down from innings 5 through 9. I learned that. I think that's the biggest takeaway. I already knew how popular the Dodgers were, and I already knew how popular the Cubs were. This was a brilliant decision. That Dodgers bullpen is going to put nightmares into starting lineups of every team in the National League. What did you take away before we get to the Cubs from the Dodgers after these 2 games?
Well, even without Freeman and Betts, they're the class of the league. And so far as the Cubs are concerned, they mustered 3 hits and then I believe 8. I mean, they weren't very impressive offensively, and it looked as though March 18th, 19th, whatever, they couldn't even have a starting pitcher go 5, which is they would probably do in the regular season in a couple of weeks when they go to Arizona. So Imanaga has 4 innings. That was a little disappointing, and then Brown didn't really pick up the slack very well, and they're counting on him to maybe be a spot starter. But in any event, it seemed like there was probably a lot of pressure on the Japanese players, to particularly the Tokyo native Suzuki playing in front of his family, friends. He probably had, like the players in the U.S. have dozens of ticket requests and all that kind of thing. And it's amazing to me if the viewership record, does that include on people taping it? Because it was 3 a.m. in Los Angeles, so yeah. I don't know. I can't imagine, that there was that many live action there. But, their offense, it showed some of their sore spots, third base, second base, to be specific. I don't know. It's going to be a bit of a work in progress there, I think. They're hoping to catch, lightning in a bottle like they did at first base with Bush last year at third base. So, so far, just with these games, and the fact that they count is almost kind of ridiculous in a way, because they'd only been, it's so early. It's like, 2 weeks or whatever before they're going to play games in the United States. But it's nice. It's nice that they made it count and that it was in Japan. And all in all, I think, it was a good decision by Major League Baseball to showcase the Japanese players, and they couldn't have picked 2 teams with with more Japanese players. But it gave me some worries about the Cubs' chances of the playoffs. Honestly, I mean, Bruhan had the most hits of any Cub, I think, if you look at it, and he was starting out maybe to be a pinch runner and a spare utility infielder, and I don't know. It's obviously Tucker's going to have to perform, and very well, and they need Horner back. I think that's the key piece that's missing, and I don't know how long he'll be gone, but that's going to be a key piece. And it looks like Cor Armstrong is going to be playing every day in center. He's exciting. He's speedy. I don't know, if his offense is going to be outstanding, but they need that in the center because, they're counting on him too. So there's a lot of young players they're counting on, really, to perform very well this year at third base, center field specifically. And, so that's going to be an issue, I think, for them. So we'll see what happens. I'm more looking forward to the Arizona series now, kind of trying to forget about that because their performance wasn't that great, and they were playing a great team, obviously, but even still, the hitting was very meager from them in that series. And, they the pitchers, particularly that came out of the bullpen, weren't that spectacular.
I think you hit it on the head on 2 different points. And the biggest one is you're not always going to play the Dodgers. Yeah. That is the one good thing, is you played arguably, and I don't even think it's that much of an argument, the best team in Major League Baseball, and you didn't perform. And you did have one of your key components in Nico Horner not in the lineup. I think moving forward, this Cubs team is going to be fine. We know the biggest flaw for this Cubs team is they need as much pop as they can in this lineup, and they don't have it. Now, if you get it from Tucker as the season goes on, and the fact that it is only mid-March goes to show how you can't cover this like the NFL. There's so much. We haven't even really started playing baseball. This isn't, their bodies aren't in peak spring training condition yet. So if you're a Cub fan, it was disappointing, especially if you woke up early to watch them. Knowing that your team is on the island, the only games that matter for 2 weeks, but you're not going to play the Dodgers every week. This Cubs team, I think, is better than last year's team. They do have more talent. I think asking these players to project better than the back of the baseball card is more likely than previous years, but that still means you have to actually perform on the field. So while you're not going to play the Dodgers every single week, you can't when you're playing the Brewers, you're playing the Reds, the Diamondbacks coming up. You cannot have runners in scoring position as often as you did and not bring them home. You cannot make mental errors and expect to win the NL Central. It's okay to lose the Tokyo series to Pikachu and the Dodgers. Shout out to Pikachu wearing that awesome Dodgers jersey. But that's not something that you can use an excuse 3 months from now when you're fully healthy and hopefully your lineup is constructed in a way in which this is the biggest flaw it's always been. Can you score more runs in an inning than just the one mandatory one this Cubs team always seems to do? Marver, any final thoughts? I know it's a little crazy to think, but here we are.
It is. I have good news, though. The Cubs will be done playing the Dodgers for the entire rest of the regular season on April 23rd when they have the final 2 games of the Dodgers at Cubs.
Beautiful.
On April 22nd and 23, because those were Cub home games. So that was half of the home schedule. And they're going to make a 2 West Coast trips. I've always questioned this great scheduling. They're going to go to Arizona and they're going back to LA like a week or 2 later. And they're going to have their one and only series in Los Angeles early in the season, too. So on the April 11th, 12th, and 13th. So they'll be completely done with the Dodgers before the end of April, which is kind of interesting. But, that's this complete schedule, it makes standings ridiculous with the complete where you play every single team in the American League, but I won't get started on that. So, but what we learned is that, like I say, some of the bullpen, Presley's going to be good, I think, but the middle relievers are a work in progress. It looks like the starters are pretty well set. They didn't have to bring Tyone or Boyd along because they only needed 2 starters. So it's interesting to see how they construct the real roster when it's formed next week. I mean, it looks like Workman is still around as far as I can tell. He didn't. I guess he was in the dugout, but I think that he's probably made the club as a utility man. But I don't know how many guys they need like that. Bruhan and Workman and whatever. But we'll see how it goes. And I have a pretty good vibe about them, but it was a little bit spoiled by that performance. I didn't expect them to necessarily win both games, but I expected a little bit of a better showing. So. But fortunately, like I say, everybody west of the Mississippi was asleep, so it probably didn't matter.
I think both are true. A lot of people were sleeping through it, so hopefully they didn't watch it and watch the losses. But more importantly, it only stings because you have to hold 2 L's for another 2 weeks. But once baseball really gets going, I think this Cubs team is just going to be fine. But they have flaws, and you saw them glaring against the best team in Major League Baseball.
Right. I mean, the England series they do in the middle of the season. I mean, I know it's further to Japan, but I mean, it just seemed like maybe doing it in March like this is a little bit weird because, it's the middle of spring training. They still have another half dozen or more spring training games starting tomorrow and back in Arizona. So their body clocks will be a little weird too, but, hopefully they'll shake that off and go into Arizona and start out strong.
We want to know your thoughts, though. What did you think about how the Tokyo series played out? Were you excited to get early morning baseball? Were you excited that it led right into March Madness? Are you disappointed that you have to hold 2 losses as a Cub fan with 0-2 while one team is 2-0 and the rest don't have a record? It is hard, but at the end of the day, probably won't mean much. But Marver, we got a whole lot left of this edition of the Sports Cubicle. There's March Madness to get into. There's some news stories, but we had to talk about the amazing Tokyo series as the Dodgers swept the Chicago Cubs over in Tokyo 2-0. For the Marvelous One, Dan Marver, I'm Mike Mercado. We got a whole lot left on this edition of the Sports Cubicle right here on WCPT 820 and HeartlandSignal.com.